around the world. You didn't even know. I didn't tell you.
You didn't even know, and no one even said, and oh my gosh.
Where are you
Yeah.
supposed to live? But guess what?
What?
I don't know if you're talking about, but I got to talk about that CNN thing tomorrow, or last night.
We are definitely going to talk about Sanjay Gupta's CNN special entitled Weed. Weed. Is that, what do you call it?
Cannabis.
Yeah. So last night, remember, or last week,
it
remember?
depends if who I am around. If I'm around you guys, I might call it weed. But if I'm around someone that doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'll call it cannabis.
I almost never say weed.
You smoke some weed? Yeah, me real quick.
I never say that.
I say it.
But that's just me.
Back ball?
I mean, I might say I'm going to rub some weed on my knee. But,
that's cool.
but, yeah.
My dad will
We're
need that.
we're definitely going to talk about it. I want to talk about it because, you know, all the families from Colorado who were on the show and the people in the industry, and I mean, fantastic. Like, hands down, so proud.
Mm-hmm.
Sanjay, man, I have some feelings. I have some feelings, but I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet.
Okay.
Not quite ready to talk about it yet. I had my hopes up for something amazing, and what we got wasn't bad at all. But man, I'm waiting for something to come along that doesn't pander to middle America and that just speaks the truth. And that wasn't what we got as far as I'm concerned. However, I'm not quite ready to talk about that. I did want to talk about, remember last week we showed that horrible video of the 2-year-old little girl who was killed in her foster placement. And that's become kind of the information has gone viral, and there are ways to give money to this family and so on and so forth. So I'm glad that's drawing a significant amount of attention. I'm horrified that the reason why it's getting attention is because this horrific thing happened. But I'm glad that they're getting the attention that they need, and that it deserves, because, you know, Texas isn't the only place that has a crappy foster care system. I mean, I'm not impressed with Colorado's either, and they have done studies and audits and those kinds of things, and have shown that I am sure that the social workers and the caseworkers who are required to go and visit these foster placements are overworked and underpaid and all those kinds of things. That is no excuse. That is no excuse for letting kids be abused or malnourished or any of those kinds of things. And I'd be hard pressed to hear a really good excuse for why you don't go out and visit a home, or how you suddenly find out that a kid has been locked in a closet, or any of those kinds of things that happen in Colorado. And you know, I'm speaking as a licensed clinical social worker. Like, I get being in the trenches and those kinds of things. I mean, I did that for a lot of years, but you know what? They're unconscionable. So unfortunately, that isn't the only story that we have like this right now. A family from Southern California is suing the city of Coronado after their children were taken away for nearly a year because the father admitted to legally smoking medical marijuana.
Jeez.
According to the legal filings obtained this week by the Courthouse News Service, Michael Lewis and Lauren Taylor have filed a lawsuit against Coronado, California, San Diego County, and 9 local police officers for what they say is a violation of civil rights that started with a routine visit from law enforcement in August of 2011. Attorneys for the family say Lewis was recommended medical marijuana by his physician in order to counter the debilitating migraines he suffered after being exposed to chemicals during the Gulf War, but investigators who stopped by their Coronado home 2 summers ago disregarded that recommendation. It says prescription. Of course, there's no such thing as a prescription. The lawsuit alleges that police officers were called to investigate the Lewis residence after being told that the family was running an illegal daycare center on the same site where marijuana was being regularly smoked. Following a visit, August 11th, 2011, police wrote that they found pot but identified no other hazard or a daycare facility, for that matter. 3 days later, however, agents with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services returned to the residence and seized the couple's 2 children, ages 2 and 4. So they didn't find what they were looking for, but instead they decided to go and grab the children. According to the lawsuit, the children were removed from their parents' care and then deposited at a San Diego emergency shelter for alleged abuse and neglected minors. Quote, the children were there for approximately 2 weeks without their parents and were no doubt terrified, the complaint states. Meanwhile, adds the lawsuit, quote, the only allegations against Lewis and Taylor were essentially that Lewis legally used marijuana and police found marijuana in the home, end quote. The lawsuit claims that the children were taken based on allegations of, quote, general neglect, end quote, but attorneys for the plaintiffs said there was no reasonable or articulable evidence to suggest such was the case. Quote, nonetheless, even though they knew Michael Lewis's use of medical marijuana was completely legal and that he had obtained a medical marijuana recommendation after an evaluation from a licensed medical doctor, and that Lewis only used the marijuana outside the presence of children and only for the amelioration of pain, these defendants seized and detained the children. They failed to conduct any independent investigation prior to seizing the children. Michael and Lauren were shocked, stunned, and amazed and terrified, it reads. Although the parents tried to take appropriate measures to have their children returned, their attempts proved unsuccessful for nearly a full year, 364 days to be exact. During that span of time, defendants from HHS allegedly lied to the court, the family's attorney says, and insisted that the children were in danger. Wow. This is so crazy to me. This is absolutely crazy military state to me. One of those defendants, Ian Baxter of the HHS, quote, misled the court by stating that he did not need to conduct any pre-placement preventative services because of the, quote, emergent nature, end quote, of the situation, and asserted that Michael and Lauren left their children inadequately attended and inadequately supervised around the marijuana. The statement was totally false, and Baxter knew it, or even worse, simply didn't care, the complaint alleges. Other statements were soon made by defendants from the Department of Health and Human Services. The complaint continues, including N. Quinteros, Benetta Jemson, Abigail Joseph, Antonia Torres, Brooke Guild, and Alfredo Guardaro. Other defendants named in the lawsuit are Coronado police officers Patrick O'Malley and Robert Klein. Those names definitely should be read out loud because, I mean, these people, do they not have kids? I mean, clearly they don't have kids or they never were a kid because that just sounds like a horrifying experience to put a child 2 and 4 through. Quote, based on Joseph's and Torres's multiple false statements to the juvenile court, the children continued to be detained in county facilities and not at home with their loving parents. As a result, they were deprived of regular, open, and free contact and companionship of family and friends, including their parents, the complaint alleges. Well, and talk about ages that it's critical in your development to bond with your family. I mean, 2 and 4, this is ridiculous. Quote, throughout the ordeal, Taylor and the children never tested positive for any drug, although Michael Lewis ingested marijuana for medical purposes pursuant to a physician's recommendation. He never tested positive for any other drug. Further, there was 1, no evidence of abuse or neglect by either parent. 2, no evidence that Michael's marijuana use impaired his parenting skills or judgment. And 3, no evidence that Michael Lewis acted inappropriately toward his children at any time ever. Finally, on August 2nd of 2012, a 4th Appellate District Court ruled against a previous decision and said that the record does not support a finding that Lewis's marijuana use or alleged mental illness had any negative impact on the children. The children were returned 5 days later, and now the family is suing for abduction of a child, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, and false imprisonment. Holy moly. News of the lawsuit against Coronado and his officers comes 2 days after the 2-year-old Texas girl passed away while in custody of her foster mother. That horrible story we talked about last week. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. We'll definitely follow up on Michael Lewis and Lauren Taylor's situation with their kids. But how is this possible? How can people have such unbelievable control over taking children from a family? But we hear stories all the time about kids who are horrifically abused, and the state does nothing. I mean, normally, at least what happens in Colorado is the first thing that you do is you look for a family placement. If the kids need to be taken from their home, you try to find a family member who is able to take them, and that's what makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. But because they were supposedly running an illegal daycare center, I mean, what? And that wasn't deemed to be the case. You would think that they would then kind of backtrack a little bit, but it sounds to me instead they were like, oh gosh, we made this big mistake about the daycare. We have to push hard on this whole marijuana issue so we don't look like idiots. But you know what, folks? You look like bigger idiots now. Not to mention you've damaged the children.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll never get that year back with their parents. I think that unfortunately people do their job and forget that their job is dealing with human beings. Exactly. And certainly, and don't take offense, folks, but when you have, a 22-year-old caseworker fresh out of college who's just told to do her job or his job, and they don't really have life context to be able to say, well, gosh, this doesn't make sense or this doesn't make sense, then this is what you get. And if this was anything other than a series of those kinds of situations, if these were seasoned caseworkers, then they need to retire now. They need to go work in some industry or some field where they're not going to impact people's lives. Yeah. And certainly not over someone doing what California decided many, many years ago is okay. And he's probably a much better dad when he's not experiencing a migraine. Yeah. I mean, does this not disgust you guys? I mean, I'm so disgusted by it. I'm so disgusted by it. Power trip. It is a power trip. And then when you find out that you're wrong, and so you have to push harder to find something. And how did this take a year? How did it take a year to be able to return the kids to their home? You would think that would be the most important thing, is to hurry up and try to figure out how to get these kids back home.
I guess a lot of things get pushed back, and it's like, oh, they forget.
I had to go on vacation.
Human life.
Yeah, I had to go skiing.
Oh yeah, it's all the paperwork. I said, listen, this is a child who's not with their parents. Every second is pretty vital.
Oh, I'd be horrified. Horrified. So this stuff has got to stop. This stuff has got to stop. We've got to figure out how to get our elected officials and our government employees and our dollar-an-hour city workers to get to real time. I mean, gone are the days where we're really afraid of people using marijuana. Yeah. Gone are those days. And we're going to talk more about that and how that's changing right after our first commercial. My name is Georgia, and you are listening to iCannabis Radio, and we'll be right back.
Whether you are a commercial grower or cultivate as a hobby, No Dough Urban Garden Supply is Denver's first stop for your hydroponic grow needs. With a wide range of products including House and Garden, Botanicare, and Fox Farm, their knowledgeable staff can get you started on your first garden or help you with your well-established business. No Dough Urban Garden Supply is located in downtown Denver at 1330 27th Street, 4 blocks north of Coors Field near MMD of Colorado. They are open 6 days a week from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Call 303-296-3424 or visit them on the web at www.nodoughurbangardensupply.com.
High up in the Rockies is beautiful Frisco, Colorado. Medical Marijuana of the Rockies is a medical marijuana center with compassion for Colorado's medical patients. Looking for great meds grown organically in soil? You've come to the right place. Medical Marijuana of the Rockies is just off I-70 at exit 203. Check them out at the web at www.mmrockies.com. Their ever-changing strain and clone selection is updated on the website daily. When making a trip to the mountains, no matter the season, stop by Medical Marijuana of the Rockies. Make sure you say you heard about them on iCannabis Radio. You can call 970-668-MEDS to get more information. Medical Marijuana of the Rockies, your mountain source for meds.
Green Faith Ministry is for spiritual guidance, MMJ information, and networking combined with compassionate care on the way to enlightenment with all Green Faith sacraments. Green Faith provides charity assistance, including medical and food throughout the year. Contact them at greenfaithministry.com.
Hi, welcome back. Goodness gracious. So we're trying to do a little house cleaning too, because we got some events going on.
That's so good. I did it.
We have a lot of crap around here.
I did it at my dorm.
You did? How was that?
Awesome. Because, the second I clean, either lose something or it immediately gets dirty really quick with like clothes and just like wrappers or like ash or something is the worst. And so, I brought my vacuum in, which I never do. And it looks awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even think straight. The ruckus in there.
Yeah, I hate mess. I have it, but I hate it. We went camping this weekend, and all of our camping gear is in our front room. We didn't get rained on a single drop.
Good.
It was it rained everywhere around us, but we didn't get rained. No.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we went up to Byers Canyon outside of Hot Sulphur Springs.
You just sell a lot of things.
Yeah,
at
we
Byers Canyon.
did a little. We did a little. Well, I didn't fish, but I watched the boys fish, and
That's what I want to do. I haven't fished yet in Colorado. I love fishing.
you do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find it interesting at all.
Really? I like it, especially when you like catch stuff. Of course, that's the best.
Right? That's yeah.
Yes, it's the
That's
goal.
what you're chasing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like, I got something. It's real. It ends. The best 10 seconds ever.
Gavin got a bite. Like he put his pole in, and he got a bite pretty fast. But
It was a boot.
it was a fish. But it just ate his worm, and off it went. And that happened a couple times. It happened a couple times.
It's easier to catch crabs fishing with squid as your bait. I used to do that in Maryland.
You did. Yum.
Fish for crabs, yeah.
That sounds fun.
And we cook them up, me and him. It was really good.
I'm a little hungry too.
It's crabs, I love crabs. Favorite food.
Is it your favorite food?
Well, not my favorite. It's one of my favorite.
Type up there for me too.
Linguine was one of my favorites. It's good.
Nice. So we have been talking about the Sanjay Gupta documentary for a while. He was on the Katie show. Not with me, because that's not true. We never sat on the same stage or whatever, but I talked to him afterwards. Anyway, and Sanjay did a fantastic job all the way up until it aired, talking about how he apologizes for his role in continuing the war on drugs, and that he does absolutely think that the DEA is hypocritical, and so is the FDA, and how dare they think that there's no they're wrong when they say that there's no medical benefit, no medical use for cannabis. It should not be Schedule I, so on and so forth.
He said something awesome that I haven't heard anyone say except for two people. And it was like, there's more bad news written about many things. But if you watch the news, there's 10 times more negative news coverage than positive news coverage. And on any study you find, it's always negative, more negative than it is positive. And he said that. He said, if you search for marijuana or cannabis, most of it will be negative.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then on the special last night that we'll talk about in a few minutes, I mean, he had the director of the National Institute of Drugs. She surprised me. She is German, maybe.
Yeah.
And she was pretty intense, but she claims that it's not her fault that there aren't studies, that they don't approve studies that are positive, because really she was blaming it on all these other organizations that approve those studies, and I think that was a bunch of BS.
Do you?
I do. I think that that definitely when you have a bias, you see everything through that bias filter. And Sanjay Gupta was the same way until it slapped him in the face, until Chaz Moore had an attack, and if you haven't seen the video, it's all over the internet, but Sanjay Gupta is in Chaz Moore's bedroom, and Chaz is having an attack, so his diaphragm is fluttering, and when he's talking like this because he can't breathe, and Chaz is talking about how cannabis helps him and those kinds of things, and then he takes he medicates, and instantly it relaxes his flutter, and Sanjay is wowed. He's convinced. Between that and Sweet Charlotte, who has DeVay syndrome, and the help that she's received from this plant medicine, he's convinced. So he does this great job everywhere talking about how convinced he was. I didn't get that from the show last night. I didn't feel that.
He was convinced.
Well, it didn't come across like he didn't say, I'm convinced, this is amazing, this is fantastic, look how wonderful this is. He put the information out there, but he never connected the dots. And you know what? In the television world, guys, don't you agree that we get slapped in the face hit over the head, kicked in the ass with all of this. They never let us think for ourselves.
Right, yeah.
But in this particular case, for whatever reason, Gupta and CNN decided that they would just put the information out there and let people draw their own conclusions.
Yeah.
You know what? Don't do that. No. Don't do that with this, especially when you say in every other setting as you're pimping your show that you're now a believer, that you've been wrong. I just didn't. That you're sorry. His apology was beautifully sincere, a beautifully sincere apology. And then that didn't come across to me at all. And I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed. I thought that Charlotte's family, her parents were amazing. I thought that they were so relatable, that they talked about their medical process with helping little Charlie. They talked about all the things that they tried and they did, and that the next treatment option, not the last resort, not oh my God, do we do this, but the next treatment option, because they had exhausted so many, was to move in this direction. And they didn't say, gosh, we thought long and hard and we pulled out our hair and, against our better judgment, we did this. No, they said this was the next option.
Yeah, it was not a choice. They said it was not a choice. And she said, I'm sure it was brought up to me, but of course it was probably not by someone who was like maybe Alan Shackelford, that was the last person they went to see. And he's a physician, that's unfortunate it is, because that was the last resort, and look how much it helped.
Right.
All that time.
Well, they've paved the ways for all these other families. Families are literally moving to Colorado for no other reason than to provide cannabis for their ailing children for a variety of ailments. And they're feeling such desperation. It's a big deal to pack up your lives and move to another state. And of course they're doing it. Of course they are, because the success rate has been pretty amazing.
Hopefully this shows, if people don't know, because I know there's a family in New Jersey who has a little girl with Dravet syndrome, and in New Jersey there's maybe one dispensary and you need 3 different doctors to say, okay, it's not likely that's ever going to happen. So hopefully they see this and pack up and come out here, because this is a more enlightened part of the country.
Well, right. There is something about the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
There is something about the Wild Wild West.
Yeah, I love it.
That allows us to make these decisions that at one point seemed very radical. It's not very radical any longer, is it? It's not very radical any longer. The percentage of the population of the United States that lives in a medical state is astronomical.
That's awesome. I didn't even think of that.
It's not just about the number of states. It's about the population of those states. And I'd read a statistic a while ago before, I want to say when we were at 16 or 17 states, that was something like 1 in 3 people live in a medical state. So don't quote me on that. But it's high. It's high. And I'll come up with that statistic. I'll find the new one because it's a good statistic. But okay, so let me read what Huffington Post said about CNN weed documentary follows Sanjay Gupta's reversal on marijuana. They just have a little blurb. A remarkable documentary aired on Sunday night on marijuana, not necessarily for its conclusions, but for where it ran, quotes CNN. The network's medical and science coverage, led by Dr. Sanjay Gupta, had long been at best skeptical and at worst hostile when it came to marijuana. But on Sunday night, in the documentary Weed, that followed Gupta's reversal on marijuana, viewers were shown an artist who works better while high, which I thought was actually amazing. I did like that part.
So glad.
We'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, that was great. A stoner who drives well high because he's used to the drug's effects. A 5-year-old whose life was saved by pot, and even an octogenarian Holocaust survivor in Israel who deals with tremors by smoking government-subsidized weed.
That was awesome.
Marijuana. Gupta's shows viewers it can even fight cancer. That such a documentary could air is not controversial medical or scientifically, but is a stark reminder of how quickly the politics around marijuana are shifting. The Group of Americans for Safe Access, which represents patients and medical marijuana providers, is thrilled at the turn of events and is hosting a discussion that begins blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I guess, that the fact that CNN did not produce and air a starkly negative, horribly painful to watch documentary is great. I expected more. I mean, I expected Gupta to fall on his knees with the Charlotte situation. Again, he gave us the information but didn't connect any of the dots. And so what I wanted pretty desperately, and certainly Charlotte's parents said this very well. I mean, they stated the facts. She went from having 300 seizures a week to having 2 a week, 2 a month, whatever. Yeah. Which is fan-freaking-tastic. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It has saved her life. But they're not melodramatic people. They're very calm, realistic people.
They didn't even get emotional, I don't think.
I think there was a few, but when that's your life, my guess is, you're one big emotion.
Yeah.
And
gotta be strong.
Yeah.
Gotta
And
be real
but I wanted Gupta to connect those dots and really say that all the things that he's been saying outside of the documentary, which is, I've changed my mind. I think this is phenomenal medicine. I think other kids should use this. On the Katie show, he said something that was so great. Katie had asked him, and I think I talked about this before. Katie had asked him, if your daughter, when she turns 21, wants to smoke with you,
awesome.
What would you say? And kind of the long-winded answer that he gave ultimately was, I'd like her to wait till she's a little bit older, so her brain has developed, but I don't see that being any more harmful than her having a drink.
That's what my stepdad asked me, the same thing a long time ago. I was 16. He's like, would you ever, if you're older, would you ever smoke a joint with your son if you had one? And my answer was, well, would you drink with Zach, my his son, my brother? And he said, of course I would. He is, he loves alcohol's fine. And I said, well, cannabis is safer, so of course I would. And he was like, oh, that's terrible. You're a terrible person for doing that. And I'm like, well, Sanjay Gupta, I guess, is also a terrible person.
Right. I mean, that to me was more what I wanted. What I was hoping the documentary would come out with was, again, the Figgies and the Moores were outstanding, and they could not have told their story better. They could not have been better ambassadors for medical marijuana and for their kids. I wish that Sanjay, who doesn't have a dog in this fight, who doesn't have a child that he's fighting for, could have said to all of America and all those folks watching, this is a legitimate medicine that should be used, and here's some examples. Yes. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
The Law Office of Edson, Maton, and Matz provides criminal defense, family law, medical marijuana defense, and advice about setting up and running a medical marijuana center, optional premises cultivation operation, and infused product manufacturing businesses throughout the state of Colorado. We're focused on providing high-quality service and customer satisfaction. We will do everything we can to meet your expectations. WarrenEdson.com. Edson, Maton, and Matz in Denver, 303-831-8188, and in Aspen, 970-948-7183. WarrenEdson.com.
Are you a runner? Are you a runner who supports marijuana legalization? Run on Grass is a group of athletes actively seeking to change our marijuana laws. We speak the truth about cannabis, bringing the message through our feet to new ears. Check out runongrass.com to find out more about us, our events, and how to join up or how to sponsor a runner. If you're in the Denver area, please join us for runs or start a group in your area. Running not your thing? Any sport can do it. On Grass. Runongrass.com.
I'm Gary Johnson, and you're listening to iCannabis Radio, and I want to say, talk it up, Colorado.
And I want to say, talk it up, Colorado. I don't know why every time I hear that, I have to repeat it.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
have to repeat it.
That's a great one.
That was the Amendment 64 kind of tagline thing. Thanks to Gary Johnson, and we'll play that probably till I'm 64. We've been talking about the CNN special documentary last night entitled "Weed," and it has gotten not just kind of in our cannabis world, and we're pretty insulated, and we think everyone talks about pot all the time, but lots of people were interested in this special, partly because Gupta did such a great job of going out and talking and writing articles about it and about his findings and those kinds of things, and it was good. So it starts off with the little history lesson, which is not unusual.
It was great. I actually liked it.
I feel like I didn't dislike it. I don't want to sound like such a negative Nancy.
Yeah.
I didn't dislike it, but I feel like that's happened a lot. And if someone's missing their their basic information like that, then they've just not been paying attention.
Right. Yeah. He did say the word pharmacopoeia, which I don't hear a lot.
Yeah.
Which is great that he even said that word, and he did get in the history, which even if it briefly touched.
That's right. He also talked about Anslinger, and not enough
Right, that
people
was awesome
not
too.
enough people talk about why Anslinger, the first drug czar, had a thing out for marijuana.
Reefer
and
Madness.
Yep.
He's one of the producers for
how he pushed all of this forward.
So that was awesome.
So that was good, and so that laid a little bit of the framework for the rest of the show. But again, information out there, but dots not connected. So rather than stating and our marijuana policies and the way that we think about marijuana is based on
from all this propaganda.
Exactly, based on this propaganda. Those are the things that I wanted him to say, and not that I think people are dumb. People aren't dumb.
No,
but
I connected that, but that's because I know a lot.
That's because you're already. I mean, you're already in the choir. Preaching to the choir doesn't help.
Yeah.
What helps is preaching to the unconverted, and in order to do that, because we know we hear negative things about cannabis, and what do we automatically jump to doing? To saying that, to dispel that that's not true. People aren't like that. If they only knew the truth, we naturally kind of dismiss anything that's negative about cannabis, which is unfair, which is just as unfair as people who dismiss things that are positive about cannabis. So we hear what we want to hear.
Yes.
And that's human nature. And so what needs to happen is that in order for at least me to process that stuff, I will dismiss it. But if you give me fact upon fact upon fact, and you don't then conclude what those facts mean, I've probably dismissed it, or I could potentially dismiss it because I don't want to believe that, because I already have my set of beliefs.
Yeah.
And so Gupta, I so wanted him to connect those dots for people. So our current drug policies are based on propaganda that, when generation upon generation is taught the same thing, it becomes somehow real and true. And he didn't say that. What he did was gave this great information but didn't connect the dots, which is, again, the same thing that he did for Sweet Charlotte. He gave this great information, and seriously, you are a stone if you could watch that family and watch this adorable, precious little girl, having
Grand mal
seizures while her sister or her mom rub her head and tell her it's okay. And the fact that she does that all night long and was on so many pharmaceuticals and having so many seizures that she wasn't able to walk or to talk or to feed herself. In fact, not just feed herself, she was on a feeding tube. She couldn't swallow. And most kids with Dravet syndrome die young. And fast forward to today, and she is adorable because she's laughing and she's running and she's playing and she's riding a bike and she's
connecting
to people. She's speaking words. She's feeding herself. That's what you want to see happen, and that's what happened for her because of cannabis. And while over the course of this hour, and it's segmented, it wasn't like all of it was about Charlotte for a few minutes and then they moved on to something else. They kept going back to the story. But there was no conclusion in my mind. And maybe the thought was, we don't need to beat people over the head. But why? We get beat over the head for everything else. Why not for this? Especially when he's saying that he's now this huge advocate, that he's been wrong and that he apologizes for the role that he played in the war on marijuana. So connect the dots for people.
Yeah.
I think that they spent a lot of time talking about, and this to me felt very pandering, about children's brains and how marijuana has these negative effects on children's brains, and that may very well be true. I don't know. They'll do some studies and they'll find out. Hopefully. But you know what? There's not information yet to know. There have been a few, anecdotal kinds of studies and those things, and the few studies. But let's not make assumptions. Yeah. And when we're talking about medical marijuana, there aren't a ton of minors who are patients. And in fact, in listening to Charlotte's parents, I mean, they had doctor upon doctor who were like, "Oh, no, thank you. We aren't even interested." And even the Stanleys thought, "Gosh, we're not gonna get involved in a 5-year-old." That just, I mean, in my mind, although they never said why, in my mind, I'm guessing that they said no initially because
illegal.
Well, I mean, potentially, but also because it's uncharted territory, and you certainly don't want to do anything. Yeah, working with marijuana in children. I mean, wow, that seems taboo.
They even gave off this aura that, I mean, while they were talking that you're the first person to give a highly concentrated form of, well, it is CBD, so I mean, it's not getting stoned, but it's cannabis to a child. That just
in every plane it seems wrong. In every plane it seems wrong. Unless you talk to this family and you see the situation, unless you talk to Chaz, and they're not. I mean, there's other families out there. I mean, I've got my friend in the chat room, and their family just moved to Colorado as well for the same reason. And this isn't a singular situation. These families are finding success in cannabis, and if it were any pharmaceutical, we'd be singing this from the rooftops. They would be on every advertisement. Everyone would be interviewing them because this miracle drug helps save their kid's life. But these families are looking over their shoulders a little bit and are a little bit worried and have to slowly kind of talk about it. I mean, in the CNN special, the very first thing they did when they got to Charlotte's house was they said, the family has never allowed cameras here.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
Well, of course, because what kind of ridicule are you going to experience? Or God forbid, if your kids are being taken away because you smoke medical marijuana in California for your migraines, what's going to happen if you actually give it to your child? I mean, these families have had to have been petrified that somehow they were going to be seen as abusing their kids. Instead, it's just the opposite. They're saving their kids' lives. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Gupta didn't do that for me. He didn't connect those dots for me. He did a lot of, and then on top of that, I mean, I know that you have to tell both sides of the story. I get it, and Christian Thurstone has to always talk about addiction, which is true. That the boy on the show who stopped going to school, and he even stopped skateboarding because he smoked marijuana, probably shouldn't smoke marijuana.
Probably not.
Okay? But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be legal.
Illegal. Right, exactly. Yeah, so just because that boy who went to rehab for, like that girl who wrote the pop book said, behavioral problems, it shouldn't have any effect on me because I am extremely responsible with my cannabis use.
That's right. Well, and the editor of the pop book, who's also a physician, very clearly said, detoxing from marijuana, not a dangerous thing to do. I mean, he didn't go to rehab so that he could detox safely. He went to rehab to learn new behavioral techniques to help him cope. Absolutely. Detoxing from marijuana from alcohol can be fatal. people die. People die. But that doesn't happen from cannabis.
No. Might be a little irritated, maybe, but you're never gonna die.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So again, I wanted Gupta to connect the dots for me. There are also some misinformation out there that I found to be kind of annoying. First of all, there is no such thing as a prescription for cannabis.
Yeah.
You can have a prescription for Marinol,
Sure.
which is a synthetic version.
I'm pretty sure 3 people have died from that.
You can get a recommendation. You can be a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they said, well, even though it's potato with this one, CBD is cannabidiol. It's cannabidiol.
Cannabidiol.
But it is potato. But every time they
No
say
one says potato, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's not true. I heard chefs say potatoes.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
I've heard them say it, but they're from England. But
They also say aluminium.
what's the aluminium?
Aluminum.
Oh, and basil.
And they also call
Basil
dessert
instead of
pudding.
Basil. Oh, that's pudding. Ew. It's dessert. But yeah, it's I can't remember what I was going with that. What was I going to say about that again?
Cannabidiol.
Yeah, cannabidiol and cannabidiol. Every time they said it 3 times again in a row. Cannabidiol. I'm like cannabidiol.
So
I mean, how could I
that's
get that wrong with talking to Josh Stanley, and Josh Stanley says cannabidiol. I've heard him. He's been in the studio. He had a show on.
That's right. right here on iCannabis Radio. So the prescription recommendation thing, I mean, that might sound just like a verbiage issue, but it's not,
Right,
because you
right.
can't get a prescription. And so that's kind of annoying. The other thing that he said is that talked about the marijuana THC levels and how we're all smoking 36% THC.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
No one is. First
No
of all,
one is
no one
doing
is.
that.
So
They might be talking about extracts.
they could be, but listen, but they weren't.
I know they were
weren't.
not. Yeah.
So I called our friend Jennifer Murray from Can Labs,
Cool.
who of course Can Labs is the premier testing facility in Colorado, and I asked Jennifer. She also does a show, by the way, here on iCannabis Radio from 3 to 4 p.m. every Monday. So she is my afternoon girl on Mondays, and I wanted to confirm what is this 36%.
Yeah.
The highest that she's ever tested, the highest is 30%.
30%. Okay, yeah, I think I've seen
Okay,
that.
so 30.
actually.
And the lowest is 4%.
Yeah.
So which my guess is.
Colorado?
Yeah, my guess is that's a CBD strain.
Oh, okay, that'd be great.
Or someone who sucks.
Yeah.
But the reality is wherever they got that 36% number, they're wrong. The only medicine that they're testing isn't medicine. It's Mexican ditchweed. They're seizing in illegal whatever.
Yeah,
and now they're testing dispensaries that have gotten busted, and they're still coming up with this 13%. So I don't know where this 36% came from. It's not in Colorado, and if it is, it certainly isn't what Can Labs is testing.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that any of that's wrong, but it's just that's a scary number to people, especially when they hear psychoactive component of marijuana, 36%. I'm sure everyone's like, oh my gosh, no wonder they say people are going to go crazy.
It's like, well, that
Psychoactive,
number is
36%.
fake.
Oh my gosh. So that was
that did make me irate.
that was bothersome.
Yeah.
And I don't want to come across as I didn't like the whole documentary, because I did.
I did too.
And overall it was very positive, but there were enough things that I was disappointed. I guess I had my hopes too high because it was casted beautifully. There could not have been better people. Alan Shackelford is fantastic and brilliant, and he's also my doc.
Awesome.
He's also my doc. I always tell him that he's my primary. If I have stuff going on, I'd rather go to Alan than any doc that takes my
so
insurance.
cool.
But he's so credible, and he wasn't on nearly enough.
Yeah,
nearly
yeah.
enough. We need to take another quick break, and we will be right back, and we'll wrap up a little bit. I'm Georgia. You're listening to iCannabis Radio.
Let's face it, rules and regulations are complicated, especially in the field of medical marijuana. Let Medical Marijuana 101 help you get through the compliance process. We can also explain to you your employment requirements, your employees, and your business. But our work doesn't stop there. Our experience in cultivation ranges from the design of grow rooms to the diagnosis and resolution of grow problems. Visit us at www.medicalmarijuana101.com or call 303-388-7706. That's 303-388-7706.
Are you a medical marijuana patient or interested in finding out how to become one? Contact Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern. Conveniently located on Hamden and Tamarack in the Whole Foods parking lot behind Proof of the Pudding. Mile High Wellness offers a wide variety of edibles, hashes, and some of Colorado's top strains. Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern. 3525 South Tamarack, Suite 110, on the corner of Hamden and Tamarack. 720-382-8516. Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern.
The National Cannabis Industry Association would like to thank its members who represent the leading professional businesses in America's emerging legal cannabis market. NCIA is the only organization that has unified legitimate cannabis business across the nation to fight for real reform in Washington, D.C. For more information or to make your business a member, visit us online at thecannabisindustry.org.
Oh, no matter what I say, definitely watch if you haven't watched.
Yeah. I think it'll be on this Friday on TV on CNN. I think.
Again?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, CNN, I think same time. But I'm pretty sure, if my memory is good, it's Friday at 8. This Friday.
Nice.
It's our-
Well, and of course, it's
yeah.
all over. You can YouTube it. It's all over the place.
Yeah,
Everyone has it on Facebook.
I don't know how they get that. Who releases? Because I recorded it, but it's shitty quality. It's just on my phone looking at a TV, waiting for me to come up.
Just in case.
Yeah, because you never know. I was at I thought Bob Krause was supposed to be on there as well. Because we were at Studio A64 in Colorado Springs, and CNN guys were there recording.
They filmed a little bit, or they showed a little bit of that.
Yeah. Oh, did they? I know they did some B-roll of the Cannabis Cup, and I'm sure there was some of that.
Which
thing.
they always like to show that too.
Yeah,
Whoever has
yeah.
the biggest blunts or joints
Yeah.
or whatever,
Exhale
which is
and
fine.
smoke.
I mean, half of this,
Looks pretty
people
cool.
have to be entertained, and so there has to be something entertaining to
That's
watch.
pretty entertaining.
And definitely, it's funny to watch.
People cough.
Some ridiculous something, but
Yeah.
but there was enough good stuff. There was
Yeah.
enough good stuff. The artist, we didn't even get to
That
talk
was
about
cool. Yeah, he was cool. He was, I think, the most real, because he said when he smokes too much, he's like,
that. Like I think he did while being interviewed. If you ask me, he was kind of funny.
Yeah, he was very funny. That he was good. He's probably one of my favorite, because he was pretty cool. He said his thing sold for like $18,000, and he was just looking at a painting and doing it, and
It was amazing. It was amazing.
They showed him smoking actually there. Yeah.
There were really good sections outside of how great the kids were.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked. It worked.
Mm-hmm.
It worked.
Unfortunately, they didn't show Zakai. I thought they would have shown him. Because at the very end, at the very, very end, like the last 3 minutes, they talked about how cannabis and cannabinoids may kill cancer cells. And that's when I thought they were going to be Bob Krause, because he has, I think, or maybe it's Clifton Black, like one of those two people, has leukemia,
Bob.
but they didn't come up. But, it's just, I know a lot of information, so I know who could
Definitely
have been.
that show is focused around kids and kids
kids,
issues
yeah.
and the potential, because right now they can no longer say that cannabis is going to cause you to rape women and
Yeah.
get schizophrenia.
Yeah.
So what they have to do is they have to say, but we don't know what happens to young
To kids, right.
to young developing brains.
Yeah.
So that's the only unknown right now.
Yeah.
So they have to focus on that. I get it. I get
Mm-hmm.
it. Gupta, if you haven't, please read his article, his apology for his role in the war on marijuana. It is not one of those, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It is a true, real apology. So
great.
yeah, it's pretty impressive.
I don't know if you knew this, but he used to be anti-decriminalization. That's crazy.
Yeah.
He thought it should be a crime to use cannabis.
Right.
Wow.
So
Not anymore.
in wrapping up, I've just got a couple interesting things. iCannabis Radio does not just sit in the studio and hang out. That's not what we do.
No, we like to do that, but that's not all we do.
So we have some things coming up. We are sponsoring San Rafael Palooza, which is one of the largest neighborhood block parties in all of Denver. Cool. It is Saturday, September 7th from 2 to 8 p.m. It is on Emerson between 23rd and 25th and 24th between Clarkson and Ogden. There will be bands, including the Bell Jar will be closing. iCannabis Radio will be broadcasting live, Chris, at some point during that event. Mm-hmm. And we'll be there. We want to see you there. It is big fun. There'll be lots of food trucks and it's just a fun time. Stuff for the kids. It's very, very, very family friendly. It's a great event.
That'd be great.
Sponsored by Noto Urban Garden Supply, the Bank of Denver, Safeway, Limon, Parallel 17, Jonesy's Eat Bar, Denver Bicycle Cafe, Cervantes, Whole String, Edson Mate and Mats, of course, who also is sponsoring us and iCannabis Radio us. iCannabis Radio and Edson Mate and Mats is sponsoring Riot Fest, which is a 2-day music festival, punk rock, old and new. And it is September 21st and 22nd. We will be there. Blink-182, The Replacements, Iggy and the Stooges, Rancid, AWOL Nation, and many, many more. It's going to be a really crazy event. There is, before the event, it's out at a farm out in nowhere, Colorado. And before the event, Colorado. There is a 5K called the Foam Fest.
Oh.
Thinking about it. I just don't want to get dirty and then be at a table for 8 hours. Foam, dirt, sticky. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. If anyone wants to do it with me, then I'm down for doing it. But I know Gavin wants to do it. Yeah. Gavin always, he wants to run any 5K where they squirt stuff at you, where you end up looking significantly different at the end than you did at the beginning. The only thing different, I want to be a little bit sweatier and then at the beginning.
A little bit more sore.
Tonight, by the way, Denver City Council is meeting to discuss some pretty heavy restrictions on retail.
Chains, I guess.
Potentially no chains. They don't know what that means yet.
Is it like the clinic? You can't have the same dispensary.
Well, it's like that in liquor, where you can only have one liquor store. So they're thinking about
by the same person. Okay.
They're thinking about making that a rule for recreational stores.
Just in Denver.
Just in Denver.
Okay.
And then they're also talking about requiring 2,500 feet instead of the 1,000 feet in between recreational stores.
Between the two? Between one recreational store and another
and
one?
another. And potentially not grandfathering people.
Oh, that's
so
scary.
We'll see. When I got here, they hadn't I hadn't watched, so I don't know what the result was. We'll tell you next week. And by the way, legal medical marijuana was sold in Washington, D.C.
Legal medical marijuana. Oh, that's awesome. And I thought you meant just Washington. I was like,
Washington, D.C.
That's awesome.
So cherry popped.
That is what's that mean?
I don't know. I'm embarrassed that I said it. I'm going to move on. Tomorrow, of course, from 6 to 8 on iCannabis Radio, Sex Pot Radio with our good friend Jenny Cush. Thursday, The Hemp Connoisseur with David from 4 to 5. Of course, every day from 11 to 1, John Doe Radio. Check it out, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then next Monday in the lab at 3 o'clock from 3 to 4. These are all mountain times. And then I'll be back on at 7. Next week is the third Monday of the month. And so that means we'll have our cannabis history lesson, which is always a good time. Sam, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chris, peace out.
Peace, bros.
Thanks for listening to iCannabis Radio. Good night.